Megan, when she was growing up, we always described her as our princess. She used to love dressing up and creative play, setting scenes with her teddy bears. I remember she had a little tea set. She used to make us pretend cups of tea and bring them over to us. That was just her nature. She was kind, thoughtful. If she saw anybody on their own, she would make the effort to go over and talk to them, make friends.
She absolutely loved musical theatre and drama. She's so timid, so quiet, and then you put her on the stage and it was like, wow, is that our Megan? She did her first solo, didn't she? And it was amazing. And it was amazing to see everybody, be affected by that, and the cheers and the claps that came after. It was so good, wasn't it?
Yeah.
She loved nothing more than spending time with her little brother. They used to lie on the settee, cuddling, watching telly. One thing that will always stick is the little videos that they used to make. Megan had an allergic reaction to what we know now as nuts when she was 9. She'd started with puffy eyes, a little bit of an itch, wheezing, and we went to see the GP. GP prescribed at that time Piriton, and then we were sent for it to have further tests to see what things she was actually allergic to. It did confirm that she was allergic to nuts. She'd never eaten or come into contact with nuts since that day until the time she had the severe reaction.
So it was just after Christmas. Megan had arranged to go out with a friend for the day. Gemma had dropped me off at the pub where I was having a few drinks with friends. I was there for about an hour. And all of a sudden my dad came charging through the door saying, "Adam, you need to come with me." At first it didn't register. He repeated himself. He said, "You need to come with me now. Megan's not breathing." And after that, the journey home was just a blur. I got onto our road. All I could see was flashing lights, ambulances. As soon as I got through the door, I just ran straight upstairs to Megan.
She used to revise on mind maps, didn't she? So she'd have things laid out all over, little like cards with things on for her to remember. So that was all the summer before for her mock exams, and then over Christmas it was going to be her GCSEs when she goes back. And she spent all Christmas, didn't she, revising, and we would be constantly like, just come out for like an hour, come and spend a bit of time with us for an hour. And it felt awful that she'd done all that and then couldn't, and then didn't get a chance to do her exams.
Our thanks to Lancashire County Council Trading Standards and the Lee family for the video Megan's Story, which I think you'll all agree is incredibly impactful and sets the scene for today's webinar. That wasn't the entire video. If you'd like to see the rest of it, it can be viewed on the TS Connect Devon, Somerset and Torbay Trading Standards website. And we'll provide a link to that in the group chat for this webinar. My name is Rachel Holden. I'm the Group Manager for Business Support and Innovation at Devon, Somerset and Torbay Trading Standards. I'll be your host today. Thank you everyone for your attendance. I know we've had a few more join us while you've been watching the video. Thanks everybody to those who completed the pre-webinar survey. There'll be a link to that in the meeting chat, and we would really appreciate it if you could take a few moments to fill that in. We've got some great speakers today, so I would like to introduce Kelly Andrews. She's a Trading Standards Officer with Devon, Somerset and Torbay Trading Standards Service, and Dave Lee, who's an Environmental Health Enforcement Officer with Plymouth City Council. They'll be your keynote speakers today. We've also had support throughout our 3 webinars, and this is the last one today, from Karen Proctor, an Environmental Health Senior Specialist Officer at South Hams District Council, Sarah Dubois-Kelly, Senior Environmental Health Officer at Torbay Council, Lee Taylor and Ros Cummings, who are both Trading Standards Officers with Devon, Somerset and Torbay Trading Standards Service. So thank you very much to you all. A big thank you also to Devon and Plymouth Chamber of Commerce for the use of their Zoom platform that we're all enjoying this webinar on today. And thank you to our other partners, Visit Devon, Better Business for All, the Federation of Small Businesses, part of the Southwest Growth Hub and the Institute of Directors. If you have any questions as we're going along, there will be a dedicated Q&A session at the end. So please either make a note of your questions to ask at the end or put them in the chat and I'll pick them up once we've finished hearing from our speakers. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Dave Lee for the first session. Dave, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Hello, nice to see you all. I just want to say that video, as many times as I've seen it now, it still brings a lump and a tear. It's really is quite emotional, isn't it? Okay, so we're going to have a 15-minute slot run through, a very quick run through of what allergens are, and looking at some of the logistics around storage, issues around cross-contamination, and some food preparation things that many businesses face. So this really is, I say, a whiz through. So I'll begin this run through with a summary of what a food allergy is and the foods known to be associated with common food allergies. We'll then go through the risks associated with handling foods in a food business, both large and small, before touching upon what management tools are available to help you manage the allergens in your business. Kelly will also cover some more on the management side as well after this presentation. Okay, so understanding allergens, what is the fuss? Well, allergens are typically naturally occurring proteins in foods or their derivatives that cause abnormal immune system responses. Now, symptoms can include mouth tingling or itching, hives or body itching, a skin rash, swelling of the lips or face, wheezing, pain, diarrhea, vomiting, dizziness, or fainting, or any combination of those symptoms. Symptoms can have a fast onset, which means they come on very, very quickly, or may be delayed for an hour or more. Now, the difference between food allergens and food intolerances are that allergens are potentially life-threatening. There are approximately 2 million people who are living with a food allergy in the UK. There are way too many hospitalizations still, and still too many deaths across the UK, either potentially linked to food allergens or directly associated with allergens. Now, when it comes to the foods themselves, 14 allergens that in the UK and Europe we regard as high-risk foods are these that we're going to cover here now. So although many of these foods are distinct in themselves and may feature prominently in a meal or a product, many may not. For example, fish soup. That may obviously contain fish, but it also may contain mollusks, milk, mustard, gluten, and celery. Now, hidden allergens can be also found in sauces, stock cubes, batters, and other mixes or coatings. Most dried fruit and some alcohol and cordial drinks contain sulfites, for instance. Now, sulfites are also used as a processing aid, such as the use in dry white powders for washing potatoes. Peanuts, you probably already know, are not a nut. They are in fact a bean. And a person may be allergic to one and not the other. Now, with allergens, and especially when thinking about allergen cross-contamination, we are talking a few grains of a substance or a drip or a residue on a container or surface that may trigger an immune system response in people living with a food allergy. Now, I want you to just imagine that you've got a teaspoon in your hand now, and just a quarter of that teaspoon has got a substance on it, maybe a powder or a liquid. Now try to imagine what 1,000th of that substance would look like. We're talking very, very, very small amounts here that could be sufficient to trigger an allergen. So today really is by no means comprehensive, but we'll take a run through some of the key areas that you should be considering or do consider when looking at allergen management in both large and small food businesses. And we'll begin with people, so staff and visitors. This plays a vital role in controlling allergens across a food business when you consider what the staff and visitor controls are. All staff, which should include temporary staff, contractors, involved in handling ingredients, equipment, utensils, packaging, and products, they should be fully aware of the food allergens and consequences of their ingestion by those that are sensitive to them. Staff should also be trained in avoiding cross-contamination of foods by food allergens. Appropriate procedures on the management of allergens should also be available and or posted wherever they need to be observed. So that might be through corridors, walkthroughs, staff areas, and certainly by workstations. That would be a good idea, just to remind staff the importance of handling, cleaning these food substances. Now, manufacturers should also be aware of people moving freely between production lines and plants, potentially transferring allergens on their clothes or hands. There may also be an allergen cross-contamination hazard in communal areas, such as canteens and the locker room. Now we'll take a quick look through of materials and supplies, and the important thing is to know what's in your ingredients at all times. Use reputable and approved and audited suppliers wherever possible. Check the ingredients of anything you buy, especially foods that are ready-made. Foods that can cause severe allergic reaction can turn up in products where you might not expect them. Also check the new may contain instructions. They may vary from time to time without any other further notice on the product itself. So keep an eye on from time to time on product ingredients and the warnings around them. You might also see warnings such as produced on a line that handles nuts, for instance, or handles gluten. And also especially check new recipe indicators, such as new flavor, new improved, that sort of thing. Check that substitutions, if you allow it, made by your suppliers do not contain unexpected allergens. Always keep a copy of the ingredients list of any ready-made products that you buy for you and staff to refer to if asked. I would always recommend that you check your ingredients information is correct for the actual food that you're handling. Now, when it comes to storage, message is quite clear, really. Be clean, hygienic, and tidy at all times. Keep both ambient, chilled, and frozen storage areas clean. When we say ambient, of course, that's your dry stores areas, shelving, that sort of thing, stockroom. Keep it tidy and well organized at all times. Should also clearly label contents for all food handlers to understand. So the label on foods that you decant or part prepare should be well labeled. Alongside the allergens information, we should be putting, of course, the name and the use by dates of foods in accordance with usual guidance. Cover foods to prevent cross-contamination or place them in suitable clean containers for storage. It's always a good idea to avoid reusing containers which might become badly damaged and scoured during use and cleaning. So they're to be avoided if you can. Now, when it comes to a premises or your kitchen, food preparation and storage areas should be designed and maintained to allow food to be handled safely and hygienically at all times. That means all areas and equipment should be clean and well maintained, including staff welfare, waste areas, delivery areas, any space where you decant goods, for instance. If you've got any old or unused equipment that's hanging around in a kitchen or area, just move it out of the way, because this can itself become a source of contamination as it builds up dust and debris. Any damaged equipment should be replaced or repaired as soon as possible, and again, remove it until it is safe to reuse. When you're using equipment, make sure kitchen staff follow your example and put things away after you've used them to be taken out later. Don't leave things around. These can all be very hazardous sources of cross-contamination. All equipment should be clean and well maintained at all times to prevent cross-contamination. You may want to consider a grab box like these on the right of this slide, which would contain a set of knives, tongs, spoons, containers, saucepans, and a chopping board for those special orders for any allergen sufferers. That also may help you help prevent cross-contamination. That does need to be kept clean though, if that's your course of action. In large food plants or kitchens, specific and separate product lines with dedicated staff can achieve a high standard of allergen safety, safe food. This needs a little more thought in a small kitchen. Consider where cross-contamination may occur more readily. Use physical barriers between the production areas or lines on a chopping board, for instance, or a section. Use of dedicated equipment. You can minimize unnecessary movement of materials too as another means. High standards of cleanliness at all times is crucial. Think about other foods that may present a risk to special diets orders. And also consider having a separate area where foods could be prepared for those orders when they do come in. Also, if you don't have the space, time can be a good spatial separation. Have any foods that you are going to prepare for a special order in advance made up before you make your regular meals, if that's possible. Now, clean does not mean any of this, does it? When we're talking about clean, and especially reducing cross-contamination risk of small amounts of a substance, you can't afford to have standards like that. Now, it's not difficult nor rocket science. As Environmental Health and Trading Standards Office will always recommend, two-stage cleaning is simple to maintain. First stage, of course, is removing any debris. Use hot soapy water, clean cloths, and then rinse off. And then your second stage, use a kitchen sanitizer and wipe those surfaces with a clean cloth or blue towel afterwards. If you're offering events or temporary facilities for certain things, for shows and things, when things are permitted, really exactly the same things apply to your regular kitchen as they would to that new space or temporary space. Remember, the legislation applies to that as well. Design, layout, and flow should always be considered thoroughly. Should have high standards of cleanliness and hygiene throughout. Staff welfare and personal hygiene will need considering each location. And different storage and transportation considerations may apply. You might need different containers, more refrigeration, more separation in that. Do you have adequate equipment and facilities and controls to maintain safety and separation of foods? Okay. So what might affect your allergens management? Well, external factors might be some of these, but we've already covered. Temporary substitutions, such as out of stocks, where the supplier sends you something that they think fits the bill. Unless you've given us strict instructions for them not to do that or to consult you first, that could present a risk. New product lines from suppliers, always a concern for review. Reformulations, such as those new recipes, new improved flavors, and of course, any changes to legislation. And within your organization or business, then small changes such as a new menu item or an entirely new menu for seasons, let's say. New suppliers or deliveries. You've got somebody else who wants to supply to you, or another business that's come forward or that you quite like the look of. New ingredients or recipe. New staff to train and supervise. That's always a good point to review your allergens arrangements and get them on board. And of course, if you introduce new equipment or new processes or procedures, they should always be a point you review your allergens management. And of course, if you've got staff that are making mistakes or not following your procedure as it should be, that's the time when you should be retraining, supervising, and just getting them on board with your correct systems. That could be the thing that makes things very, very bad indeed. Now, Kelly will say a bit more about labeling in a moment and descriptions and the law, but when it comes to service, display, and communications, if you offer self-service items, or which of course at the moment are a bit difficult, you should consider how you're going to prevent cross-contamination, such as the use of utensils between different foods and different products. Provide easy-to-read signage, and that should always be located in a prominent position. Train your staff to confidently handle any queries relating to allergens in your food. We're probably all familiar with this particular book. It's been around with us for probably 15 years or so now, I think, or 13 years. The Safe Food Better Business Pack for caterers, and there's another one for retailers too, has dedicated sections to help take you through the food safety risks associated with most smaller food businesses, and medium size, of course. Use the allergens and safe methods templates here to help you identify and control the risks by designing and implementing your own safe methods. There's scope for you to do that and consider that. The Managing Food Allergens tools will help you to plan and monitor how staff are applying your own safe methods. It will help you to plan and create an allergens matrix to keep a track of allergens in your business, and Kelly will mention that a little further later. These tools are all there to help you keep track of suppliers and plan training diaries also. There's some really good tools in that kit. Now, I'll be taking any questions during the Q&A segment after this, or Rachel or one of the other officers will be there to answer any questions. But if what I've just delivered there has prompted you to think about how you're doing things in your own business and you've got some questions around it, then please think of those questions and ask them in the chat.
I just want to start by saying everything that you're going to hear from me in the coming up slides is available on our step-by-step guide to allergens, which you can get through our website. So don't worry too much about scribbling down notes of the documents that I mentioned and where you might be able to find them. Just visit that website afterwards that's already been put in the chat box for you, and it will take you to it. So to start us off, it's understanding the basics of allergens. So Dave's gone through a little bit with you, but it's really key in building your system is making sure that you and your staff understand food allergens. So to help you, the Food Standards Agency have provided you with a free online training tool for that. It's a really good system. It's broken down into modules. At the end of it, you'll get a certificate to say that you've completed it, and your staff will get a certificate. So print copies of those off and keep them in your staff training records. You should be regularly refreshing this sort of training. I would say do this once a year. It's not a one-off task. At least once a year, go in and ask your staff to complete this training again. Ideally, your training record should verify that your staff have understood what their duties are, both front of house to give accurate allergen information, and in the kitchen itself to actually produce that safe food for people with allergies. So in terms of building a system, the key message here is to create a system that works for you as a business and also helps you to provide a positive customer experience, because it is about that as well. It's providing that reassurance for people with allergies. What we know is that Food Standards Agency did a survey a few years back where they discovered roughly 60% of those with allergens were repeat customers to the same place. Why? Because they had a good experience there. So whatever system you end up choosing, make sure you keep it documented. And in terms of building the system, these are some of the things that we recommend. So start at supply, use the information that you have on your ingredients and go through each and every recipe and dish and work out what your allergenic ingredients are. And when I say each and every dish, I mean all the component parts that are within that. So for example, if there's a side salad and you put a salad dressing on, or if it comes with vegetables and they're coated in a butter, all of this needs to form part of your allergen management system. Any condiments as well, drinks, anything like that. We always recommend that you write down your recipes so that you know that the same food is being produced each and every time, and therefore you know what the allergens are within. If you change your recipes at all, you make an ingredient change or a process change, remember to review that system again. Have a think about whether that means your allergens have changed too. How you decide to do this is entirely up to you. So it could be in the form of a notebook, on index cards. I say if you're a bit more tech savvy than I am, you might be more used to using spreadsheets, and you might like to keep that information on spreadsheets. Whatever works for you as a business, but we tend to recommend using the matrix or recipe cards. And to give you an idea of how that might look, I've created one here to give you an idea of how you can use these matrix to best support you as a business, but also so that you can support the customer. So what you'll see here is we've broken down the allergens contained within certain dishes, but what we've also done is we've broken down where that allergen has been introduced, what ingredient has brought that allergen into that product. This means if you have a special request order, you can review your matrix and see if there is any adaptations that you can make to make it suitable for that particular diet. So for example, if someone was allergic to milk, you could see that they could have the spaghetti bolognese, but without the parmesan, because that's where the milk's been introduced. But if, for example, they were allergic to celery, you'd automatically see that that was part of the beef stock and therefore integral, and it couldn't be removed. I would also use these to record any may contain statements that you will get on your packaging. These are crucial bits of information for somebody with an allergy. So I would mark them down as contained, or use an asterisk system again to say may contain. In terms of any substitutions that you might make to make this suitable for a certain diet, just bear in mind that will change the format of the matrix. So for example, if you're providing something with gluten-free bread, you will have to then review what that gluten-free bread is as well, just to bear in mind that things like gluten-free bread will have milk, egg, which is uncommon in typical bread. So in designing your system, it's really important that you understand food labels. Allergens are not always immediately obvious by the name of the food or the ingredient, what we call the hidden allergens. So always go through and have a look. They will be highlighted for you. They will be pulled out on the labelling in bold or underlined for you, but you just need to go through and see where they are. Substitution of ingredients, this has been touched on already, but it is a really important point that one brioche roll, for example, may have completely different ingredients, so don't assume it's like for like, always go back and check. Review your system and amend your system. If it's not working, you know, make amendments to make it work. It's really crucial that you keep on top of that. Don't assume that because a food is suitable for a particular diet, that it will be suitable for those with allergies. A really common one here is vegan. Vegan doesn't necessarily mean that it will be entirely free from because of cross-contamination. So always check the label, never assume. If you are a bit more tech savvy and you like keeping things online, the Food Standards Agency Ireland have produced a really good free tool called MenuCal, whereby you can input all your recipes, all your ingredients, and it will flag for you what the allergens are. So now that you've built your system, you have to consider how you're going to pass that information on to the customer. So what the law states is that you can do that in writing or you can do that verbally. So writing would be on each and every menu, or verbally would be whereby you choose to speak to the customer if they request it. So if you choose to do it verbally, it is a legal requirement for you to have a notice clearly displayed, telling people that that's how they obtain allergy information. It's not good enough of a business to say that you don't know and therefore you cannot provide the food. It is a legal requirement for those 14 listed allergens. So you must have these systems in place. And then also, what about the allergens that aren't listed? It's not one of the 14. Could you cater for those other requests too? That's just another thing to think about. So here's an example of the labelling and signage you might be able to use. Things like this poster are available on our website, so you can download that from there. Or if you wanted to write it on your menus, an idea of how you might be able to do that. So top tips for knowing, making sure your customers know what is in your dishes. So using clear menu descriptions. There is an increasing trend for slightly more basic menu descriptions perhaps to be used. The example I use is something like pork 3 ways. For example, if that had a sausage on it, we would know that that would potentially have gluten or sulfites in it. So we say use clear menu descriptions. If you're selling a fish pie, say fish pie made with salmon and prawns in a creamy sauce with cheesy mashed potato. That way you're automatically letting the customer know about some key allergens that are in that dish. So use posters to indicate that customers should speak to you about allergens or add allergy warnings to your menus. Takeaway menus, have a think about how you're going to deal with that. Are you going to add a note to them to say to talk to you about allergens, or are you going to specify the allergens using the little keys that you often see to say what allergies are in a particular dish? And also have a think about how you might want to mark those delivery containers with allergy information so that people know when the dish arrives with them. And importantly, never ever guess or assume, always make sure that you check. So dealing with an allergy request, so this is another key point. It's all well and good having the systems in place, but if nobody knows how to use them, then obviously it would fail from the outset. So do you and your staff know what to do if a customer makes an inquiry about allergies? Are your staff trained on how to use your system? Are your staff aware of where to find your system? Small point, but it's really crucial that they know how to access and where to access that sort of information. It might be that you decide that you want to nominate certain members of staff to deal with all allergy requests, which is fine, or it might be that you want to train all of your staff into dealing with those requests. Whatever you do, always make sure that you write an allergy down. Don't ever rely on verbal communication. We all know that kitchens are busy, bustling, loud places, and verbal messages can easily get missed. So always write it down, highlight it, underline it, asterisk it, whatever you have to do to draw that special diet request to the kitchen staff. Something else that we're often told is that customers seem to like when the chef can come out and speak to them directly and understand their requirements. I realise it's not always possible because you're running busy kitchens here, but that's just a tip that people seem to like. So takeaways, so always ask your customer if there's any specific allergy requests, and also consider how they're going to be able to access that information. Are you going to have it online? What would happen if that person doesn't have online facilities? Will you be able to read that information out to them? So it's just another thing to think about for those takeaway sales. Also, how are you going to mark the dishes made for a specific diet? How are you going to specify what allergens may or may not be within? You can buy stickers where you just go through and check, or you could just use a simple written system, provided everybody in the kitchen knows what they're doing. And also, what information are you going to pass on to the delivery driver? They also have a role to play in this allergy scenario. So will you give the information on to the delivery driver? Will you make sure that there is a menu popped into every delivery bag? And if that's got the allergen information on, you know that that's gone with it. But it's just another thing to think about. So changes in the law, there's quite a big change coming up in October 2021, which is more commonly known as Natasha's law. Natasha is the case of the young lady who ate a sandwich from Pret, which contained sesame in the dough of the bread, to which she was allergic, and she sadly passed away after boarding her flight with her dad. As a result of this, they've decided that we needed to change the law. We needed to do more in terms of foods which are pre-packed for direct sale. So pre-packed for direct sale doesn't actually have a legal definition. However, the FSA has defined it as foods that have been packed on the premise from which they're being sold. And they've also produced and are constantly updating their website in terms of the guidance out there for you. So if you supply pre-made sandwiches, salad bowls, wrapped cakes, any sort of grab and go food, then from October next year, you'll need to label that with the name of the food, a full list of ingredients, and any allergens emphasized in some way, whether that be bold, italics, capitals. As I say, this is a really big change for many, many businesses. So please do visit our website afterwards to find all the links you need to the FSA information. So a quick recap, maintain an up-to-date allergy matrix, remembering those hidden allergens and those condiments and side dishes. Display posters or have written allergy information. Ensure your menu descriptions are clear and not ambiguous. Telephone orders, always ask if somebody in the party has an allergy. Have written and highlighted orders to pass on to the kitchen staff. Train your staff on how to access and use the allergy information. Have a system for marking delivery containers to show which allergens are present. And importantly, always be honest with your customer. So if you cannot confidently cater for their request, then say so. And that's a really key point that I'm just going to mention again. So if after careful consideration, using all the resources available to you, if you do not feel you can safely provide a dish for a customer, it is okay to say no and politely explain to them that you can't confidently and safely cater for their needs. In terms of further support, as I've said a couple of times, please visit our website for the step-by-step guide to allergens. It will have everything that you need there to build a really robust system. There are a few other options for you for getting support from trading standards also. We have something that's called a primary authority partnership, or we provide bespoke business advice to businesses. If any of you out there use measuring equipment, so scales or volumetric equipment, we also have a UCAS accredited lab. And we also run the Buy with Confidence scheme, which is a approved trader scheme that you might have seen the logo for. Other support that's available to you, Anaphylaxis UK and Allergy UK, they've got a load of information and resources on their websites for businesses, and also a lot of information on what an allergy is and the effects that that might have on a person. So I thoroughly recommend that you visit those websites afterwards as well. And the Food Standards Agency, as I say, they are constantly updating their guidance at the moment, particularly with reference to the changes in October next year. So also a good site to keep an eye on.
Thank you very much indeed to Kelly and Dave. That was really interesting and you covered a lot there. There are already some questions coming into the Q&A. So we've had a first question that came in. Does this apply if somebody asks for a doggy bag, not having finished their food in the restaurant? And thanks very much to Ros there, who's clarified that any food is caught. But as she points out, normally, what we refer to as a doggy bag is for people to take home their leftovers. So the allergens would have already been discussed prior to the meal. We've also got a question there, distance selling. So using Uber, Just Eats and Deliveroo, okay for takeaway, but what about convenience retailers selling pre-packed branded food? Ros, you've given some indication there that pre-packed branded food should have full information, including the allergens highlighted. Kelly, is there anything more you want to say on that, or are you happy that that's enough of an answer? Obviously,
no,
pre-packed direct sale is a big change.
I think it is a big change. It's going to make an impact on many businesses. So I would definitely say do visit the website. In fact, just this morning, I've noticed an update whereby you can do a decision-making tool where it asks you some questions to help you establish whether you're going to be pre-packed for direct sale. If something is put into packaging at the consumer's request, that is not classed as pre-packed for direct sale. So it is where you put it into packaging prior to that request being made. But that would include, for example, if you are keeping things under a hot heat lamp or something, and you're getting yourself ready for your busier period of time, you're packaging that up ready. According to the guidance, that will in the future be classed as pre-packed for direct sale. So it is far more widespread than it used to be.
Thanks, Kelly. Another question here. So the question, how can I find out how much of an allergen is in a product? For example, extracted malted barley in Rice Krispies, but it doesn't say how much is used. Kelly or Dave, do you have an answer to that one?
I can take that one if you like. No, you're right. Unless food's actually indicated as in the name of the food or part of the description, then it usually won't carry a percentage next to it. So if it's, for instance, chicken soup, it will say 40% chicken or thereabouts, or if you get the understanding of that. Now, when it comes to smaller ingredients, which on a label are usually begin with the largest amount as the first largest quantity in the first part of those ingredient list, and then getting smaller and smaller as you go through. So you're quite right, it doesn't actually say how much extracted malted barley unless that was in the name of the food. But you've got to assume that there's sufficient in there that might be the sufficient milligrams of the food to cause an allergic reaction, as it has to be there as a named allergen. Hopefully that makes sense. unless Kelly's got something further to add to that.
No, Dave's quite right in what he says. So ingredients will be in descending order by weight. Compound ingredients, so something that is made up of several other ingredients, will have those open brackets and then the listing of what those compound elements are. But in terms of actual levels, it would be very difficult to tell. The legal requirement is that if it is in there, you declare it, but there is no level requirement apart from sulfur dioxide. That's the only one that specifies a certain level for that requirement to come in.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.
Steve Collum, I can see you've got your actual hand raised. Can we come to you?
Yeah, that's a follow-up. So that question came from me about the malted barley extract in Rice Krispies. The reason I'm asking that is that obviously I'm trying to provide a Rice Krispie cake for customers. Those with gluten obviously can't have malted barley extract because of the gluten in there. If you look at the celiac website, though, they do say that that some people with an allergen to gluten can actually have malted barley extract, depending on the amount of malted barley extract in that product. So is the law going to be changed next year then, so that these big manufacturers are going to have to declare how much of a percentage of those allergens are in their product?
No, I don't believe there's any anticipated changes in terms of specifying levels. I think it will just be that you have to name that allergen. There are some exemptions for certain ingredients whereby they believe that the levels have been reduced to an amount where they no longer would trigger. For example, if it was used in distilling process in alcohol. But there are anomalies like that. So, for example, I know malt vinegar is one of them. Which I believe, don't quote me, that for those who are celiac, it's generally, for some people it is okay, but it is still, a barley, and so needs to be declared, even though the levels that are then in a vinegar is minimal. But no, there's no anticipated changes in terms of manufacturing for that.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Kelly. Somebody's asking here, is the ingredients list, i.e. where they are listing allergens in bold or in some other highlighted way, as you mentioned, Kelly, is that 100% safe to be relied upon?
Well, it should be. So, if they're going off the, what they're putting into the manufactured product, for example, they are reliant on the information given to them. In terms of may contains, that's a much trickier area, and that tends to be dealt with through risk assessment from a manufacturer's point of view. So there's some areas that you cannot eliminate the risk of cross-contamination, and that's when you will find may contain statements. But that is done on a risk assessment basis. But in terms of the reliability, if it's highlighted in bold, it's in there. And if it's not listed as an allergen, it shouldn't be in there, but there might be a may contains. And I appreciate that is not always an easy concept if you have an allergy to use.
Could I ask, are manufacturers tending to use may contain as a kind of a fail-safe, even if they think it's highly unlikely?
So there was something a few years back when these changes came in to really drive manufacturers to reduce the amount of may contain statements, because they appreciated that it is confusing for people. So this is when it falls down to this risk assessment idea. And so there is the anticipation that the business will do a risk assessment to show whether or not they can or cannot exclude that allergen. It shouldn't be used as a get out clause. There should be some theory behind why the statement is being used or not being used. I do believe that there is a bit of a drive on manufacturers to cut down on the amount of allergens they use full stop. So if there is a replacement product that they can use that is not an allergen, to try and introduce that into the product instead. But I do, as I say, I do have sympathy that that may contain statements is difficult for a caterer, and it's difficult for someone with an allergen, but some manufacturing processes just don't lend themselves to anything but that sort of statement being used.
Thanks, Kelly. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
There's a question here from the username, which is FitJ3. I'm not entirely sure I quite understand what you mean. So it says the customer needs access to information before they purchase. The distance selling question refers to manufacture of pre-packed foods. How can customers get access to that? I don't know whether you can come on and perhaps just give us some more information about what exactly it is you mean there, or whether Kelly and Dave think that they understand and can answer.
Yeah, so just to explain,
Thank you.
Deliveroo and Uber and Just Eats are designed for takeaways, and obviously with that scenario, the customer's phoning and usually phoning and ordering, and or there's an expectation that a discussion will happen. Those services are now being used for convenience retail, where customers are buying pre-packed food, so Hovis bread, Mars bars, cans of Coke, and they may want to find out what allergens are in those. Those services don't really have the facilities like Brand Bank or anything like that. So the only solution that I can think is to put a message on there telling customers if they want to know about products and allergens in them, that they should call the store. I just wanted to see if anyone has a view on it.
I mean, I could give my view on it. I wasn't aware that those sort of platforms had moved over to supplying almost retail items. The mandatory labelling information that is required on pre-packed products, so walk into the shop and walk out with a loaf of bread type thing, that those requirements are required to be available on online platforms. So if you're buying something through an online shop, you should have all that mandatory information available to you prior to purchase. And if you're not doing it, i.e. the information is there for you, then you need a telephone number or something that somebody can ring. So as I say, I'm slightly, I didn't know that Deliveroo and such likes were now offering those services, but my feelings would be that they would need to provide all mandatory information for pre-packed products.
Yeah, they definitely are, and the guidance is slightly different if you look at Northern Ireland, Scotland, England and Wales. England doesn't mention the telephone option, but the others do. So the telephone option, giving people a number to call, seems like the only way to do it, because you've got no control over manufactured pre-packed products. You're not making them. You don't know the ingredients. The only way is to refer to the packs.
Thanks very much for clarifying the question. I really appreciate you coming on there. Thank you.
No problem.
We've had some questions about gluten and when you can call something very low gluten or gluten-free. Lee's given a good example, a good explanation in the chat. Lee, do you want to could you just give that to everybody, please?
Oh yeah, well there is actually some Food and Drink Federation guidance on this subject that we all adhere to in relation to the terms very low gluten and gluten-free, and there are specific limits and that your product has to comply with to be able to call your product or use those claims on your product. And so gluten-free is technically not gluten-free. It contains a very small amount to the amount of 20 milligrams per kilogram or 20 parts per million. And but of course the practicalities of that is that you're looking at such small amounts that if you're looking at a product yourself, the difficulty is how do you know that you're at 20 parts per million? And so that either requires some sort of analysis or it requires formulating the recipe to an extent that you're not going to be including any ingredients. And the difficulty, of course, as pertain to in the question, is the cross-contamination situation. If you've got flowers that of course are airborne and you're in a very small and confined space, then the risk of cross-contamination in that instance could be quite high. Unless, of course, I mean, there are things you can do to prevent it, certain amount of segregation, although it depends on your business. I know for a fact that, if you can segregate so as to do all your gluten containing products one day have a good clean down at the end of the day, then come in first thing in the morning and schedule your production so that you do non-gluten first thing in the morning after you've had the clean down the night before, so there's none of that in the air at the time. Then that's a possibility, but again, that depends on the practicality for the business involved. It's very, very difficult, and unless you've got the money to go analysing it, then you may have to sort of resort to saying, you know, actually we can't guarantee this. It all depends on the risk assessment as per your individual business and what their circumstances are.
Thanks, Lee. Final question then, we've been asked, is there anywhere, do we have any links where I can find some more information on may contain risk assessments? Dave, can you take that one?
Okay, so using risk assessments on may contain, I think, can be found in the UK hospitality pages, and there is some links and advice there through the Food Standards Agency pages too. If Kelly has got any further suggestions, maybe I can invite her just to add any other links that she might also be aware of there.
I was just having a look to see if I could find it. So several years ago, the FSA did do a really good document on may contains and risk assessments. And I've just had a quick look to see if I've got it in my files, and I can't see it for a minute. If we can find it, we'll post it on the frequently asked questions document. But in the meantime, I would Google Food Standards Agency risk assessment allergen management, and it should come up. As I say, I have a feeling it was maybe 5-6 years ago that they produced it, but it would still be relevant now.
There may also be some, sorry, just to further add, some very useful tools on the Allergy UK pages and the Anaphylaxis campaign pages in relation to technical guidance, if available. And you can always email them for that guidance too. They're really helpful organisations out there to support allergy sufferers and, of course, businesses trying to comply with allergy safe food.
Lovely, thank you. So that's all we've got time for now. So thank you very much for everybody's questions. Once again, thank you very much indeed to Kelly and to Dave and to our support in the background for making this webinar possible and for giving us the benefit of your expertise. Thank you very much indeed to everybody who has attended. We really appreciate your time. So that leaves me then really just to say thank you very much. Please enjoy your afternoons. And if you have any further questions, then you can get in touch with both Trading Standards and your local environmental health departments through the county council or district councils. All the information is available on our websites. Please have a safe afternoon and thank you very much.